WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. I'm talking today with Boston's Chief of Streets, Jascha Franklin-Hodge. Jascha, how are you doing today?
Doing well, and it's great to be here with you, Daryl.
Now, before we get down to business, for folks who don't know, real quick, what do you do?
Yeah, so I oversee the city's public works and transportation departments. I work for the mayor and represent her in helping to make sure that all of the priorities that the administration has for the streets are taken care of. And that covers everything from how we design our streets, how we make changes on those streets, if we're adding a bus lane or adding safety features. The cabinet that I oversee includes public works, and so that is plowing the streets, picking up the garbage, making sure the street lighting is working. Got about 800 people across the various parts of our organization, and also looking ahead and saying, how do we want our transportation system to work 5, 10, 50 years from now, and trying to build towards that future.
All right. So speaking of transportation and traffic, Boston has a problem because INRIX, a company that specializes in traffic analytics, has released its annual global traffic scorecard. And Boston is ranked number 2 in the country and number 4 in the world for the worst traffic congestion, with 134 hours in delayed times per driver. So, my question to you, does this surprise you?
I think the global ranking was a little bit of a surprise. There's some pretty congested cities in the world, and was surprised that we were in the top 5. But I mean, I think anybody that's spent time in Boston driving a car, riding a bus, even walking, sometimes you notice that you're going faster than the folks in cars. I think anybody that's lived here can tell you that we have a real challenge with getting people around and doing it efficiently. And there are parts of the country where people think nothing about driving 5-10 miles to go to dinner. And you do that here in the Boston area, and that's a 3-hour trip on some days. So I think we're really looking at this and asking, what are the things we can do in the short term to help people move more effectively, and long term, how do we start to think about transforming our transportation system so that we're not spending all of our time stuck in traffic?
Yeah, I gotta say, I think I'm a little surprised, right? I'm a walker myself. I walk or I take public transportation. I just never noticed that it was that bad. And I'm curious, what parts of the city are you looking at? What does congestion look like in those places during rush hour?
Yeah, well, I think an important thing to know about the INRIX study is they're not just looking at the city of Boston. They're looking at the region. So that's a factor in all of this, because for many people in Boston, they have access to high-quality public transit. Less than 50% of people who live in Boston drive to work every day. The really severe congestion, the sort of, bang your head against the steering wheel, call your friend, say, sorry, I'm going to be super late for dinner, like that kind of congestion, it's coming from the freeways. We see Interstate 90 or 93 more often back up, and that spills out onto city streets. And so now it's sort of like every city street anywhere near a freeway is jammed, and people can't get across town because of it. There's no one easy answer or solution or explanation to that, but a big piece of it is thinking about regional travel. How do people who work in the suburbs and live in the city get around? How do people move from one suburb to the next? We have a commuter rail system that wasn't as good as it could be before the pandemic, and I think it's really struggled post-pandemic to attract riders and to keep service levels up. Now, that having been said, right, I can't just point my finger at the state and say it's all their problem, right? Because, Boston is a 400-year-old city that was not designed with automobiles in mind, and most of our street grid was laid out pre-automobile, and there's just not space in the city for us to have dense living with the people we have and for everyone to get around in a car. You could be trying to get from Mattapan to Alston, and that could be an hour. And that's an indication of the sort of bigger challenge and the long-term challenge, which is that if we're going to grow as a city and be prosperous and create more jobs and invite more residents, we can't keep adding cars. We have to figure out how to get more of our trips out of passenger cars and into more space-efficient types of vehicles, whether that's transit, bike, or on foot.
Okay, Jascha, I want to take a step back because I want to give people a sense of why this is important, beyond being in a car and being stuck in traffic. So tell people, why should they care about traffic congestion in their community?
Yeah. If you're listening to this stuck in traffic, I probably don't need to tell you that it's not much fun, right? So, I think there's that kind of personal quality of life aspect of this, of just there's the time, but there's also the unpredictability. It means we're spending less time with our families. It means we're leaving earlier, we're getting home later. It means, for some people whose jobs are dependent on them arriving exactly on time, whose job security is tied to that, it often means that, they have that added anxiety and stress. We have the broader challenges of growth, right? If you're a company that's looking to expand or looking to invest, are you going to do it in a place where your employees are already sort of like, I can barely get to work every day? There's other sort of second order things that come from this. I mean, there's studies that have shown a correlation between commute length and certain kinds of health problems. The just sort of added cumulative stress of all of this too on people's lives. It makes them, even when they're there with their families or they're there at work, they, may still be shaking off the stress of the commute, and that makes for, less rich personal lives. So when you magnify that out societally, right, that costs us money, that costs us time, and it costs us happiness. And, those are three things we can't afford to just be throwing away stuck in traffic.
Yeah. I'm hearing equity in your answer, when you're talking about people and their jobs, and time they can spend with their family. But there's also an environmental component to all of this, too, as well, because cars are just idling on the road and dispensing their exhaust into the atmosphere. We're going to take a quick break, but we'll be right back with more from Boston's Chief of Streets.
Did you kill Marlene Johnson?
I think you're one of the first people to have actually asked.
From WBUR and ZSP Media, this is Beyond All Repair, a new podcast about an unsolved murder that will leave you questioning everything.
Somebody should be in jail for murdering my sister.
A woman who's never been believed.
As long as they think I have done this, then they're not looking for who actually did this.
And that's what makes it a cold case.
No, it's a botched case.
And a search for the truth, once and for all.
Wow, it just gets more interesting.
Beyond All Repair. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
Be careful. You're digging in a place that's been very peaceful for a while.
Do it anyway. Dig.
And we're back. So Mayor Michelle Wu has made addressing traffic congestion a priority. That includes safer street design, affordable and reliable public transportation, and more bike infrastructure. What exactly is the plan to execute?
Well, I think it starts from a realization that the only way to fix traffic is to have less of it. And the only way to have less of it is to have more trips taken by means other than people driving themselves in a car. Our focus as we look to the future is, how do we make that possible? What are the barriers to people using transit? What are the challenges that people face when they consider biking? And how do we start to make those things better and more attractive to people? Now, some stuff we can't do all by ourselves, right? The T has a lot of challenges, and we don't control the T, and we can't fix those, but we can be good partners with the T. So we're looking at the places where people in Boston spend the most time on a bus stuck in traffic, and we're giving space for the bus to run and bypass that traffic. The city rolled out its first center-running bus lane on Columbus Ave in JP, and we're going to be extending that. We're looking at additional places where we're adding bus-only lanes. We're even doing things like retiming our traffic signals so that if a bus comes to an intersection, the light may change a little quicker so that the bus doesn't have to wait. For biking, the number one barrier that we hear when we survey people about why they don't bike is safety. And what research has shown is that to get people feeling comfortable on a bike, you need to have a safe, connected, low-stress network of places for them to ride. It's great that you build a bike lane, and it's really nice and comfortable and safe, but if it dumps you out into a 5-way intersection where feel like you're taking your life in your hands,
it can be an extreme sport sometimes.
Seriously, it feels like you're in a video game, but there's not a reset option, is the problem. Our approach to biking is to look at the network, right, and to say, where are there those gaps? Where are those stressful places? We have the outline of a really good bike network, but it doesn't always connect. And so we're trying to focus on making those connections while we also grow the number of protected lanes that we have, or the number of residential streets with traffic calming on them that are places where people feel comfortable riding. And the third piece of this is about pedestrians, right? And I would say the number one thing that I hear from community feedback, emails when I go to meetings, is people don't feel safe walking on our streets. They talk about the speeding in their neighborhood, and people are telling us over and over again are barriers to them walking and feeling comfortable and safe on foot. So we're investing more in traffic calming. We're investing more in redesigning our intersections, retiming our signals so that drivers slow down, we avoid the dangerous speeds, and to create conditions where people aren't having near-miss events that tell them, oh, maybe I shouldn't be walking here, or I shouldn't let my kid cross this street.
Yeah. Do you have a specific project and timeline in place?
We have a lot of projects. We have dozens and dozens of projects all over the city. We kind of go street by street, but some of the things we use to guide that, we have a map of our high injury network. This is really looking from a safety lens at the places where there's the highest number of deaths and injuries on our streets. And so we use that as a key element to prioritize where we work. We look at patterns of historic investment and disinvestment. There are neighborhoods in Boston that really have not seen the kinds of investment in their transportation system that they need. So we're trying to prioritize more of our work in these places to rectify some of those past harms and to acknowledge that some of these communities are the ones worst affected by safety on the streets, and often some of the communities that are the heaviest users and most dependent on transit. We prioritize safety projects in neighborhoods that have higher numbers of children and older adults. We prioritize safety near public facilities like parks and libraries. Some of the really big ones, we have a plan to reconstruct 3 miles of Blue Hill Ave, all the way from Mattapan Square to Grove Hall. Tremont Street in the South End is being completely rebuilt as what we call a complete street. So it's got accommodations for buses, for bikes, safer for pedestrians. Last year, we announced the intent to build 9 miles of new bike lanes in Boston in 2023. So we're deep in the planning on that. But those, again, are really focused on closing the gaps in our bike network and making that an option for more people.
If I'm someone listening to this and I want to be a part of the solution, right? What can listeners do to play their part in decreasing traffic congestion?
Yeah, I would say think about how you travel and think about trying something new. Maybe not for every trip. I'm not telling everybody to go out and sell their car, but try a bike or an e-bike for a trip. Look at how you might consider changing your own transportation patterns and advocate, right? Advocate with your elected officials for investment in the T. Advocate for safety improvements in your neighborhood. We need that kind of collective spirit to think about the kind of transportation system you want to have and to go to work individually and together to try to make that a reality.
Got it. Chief Jascha, thank you so much for talking with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Daryl. It's a pleasure.
That's Boston's Chief of Streets, Jascha Franklin-Hodge. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. Please hit us up on Instagram or Twitter. Let us know your thoughts. What do you want to hear? Hit us up at WBUR The Common or send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.